Alter egos, alternate consciousness, the double life, if you will. A beautiful mechanic that allows some of our favorite superheroes to exist in comics, video games, and movies. Peter Parker has his Spider-Man alter ego, Bruce Wayne has his Batman alter ego, Clark Kent has his Superman alter ego, and I'm sure most of you know the rest by now. Unexpectedly, I found out that Disney gave one of their iconic characters the same treatment. The character in question? Donald Duck. Donald Duck was given a superhero alter ego that would eventually end up getting his very own superhero game called Disney's PK Out of the Shadows, which was released on the PS2 and the GameCube in 2002. Unfortunately, Donald Duck's superhero game was met with mixed and negative reviews when it was released. Thanks to the outstanding Wayback Machine, I was able to revisit some of its reviews, and those didn't hold back at all. Critics had almost nothing but terrible things to say about this game. One review was happy to use the word abysmal to describe the game. Another review described this game as problematic with some strong points. And another review essentially said that this game had no distinguishing qualities in comparison to other beloved video games, Ratchet & Clank and Sly Cooper. I did what had to be done and bought a copy of this game on eBay. However, before I go into my typical review of these retro video games, I'm going to be doing something I typically never get to do. We're going to dive into the history of Donald Duck's unpopular superhero alter ego, and then I'll be discussing Disney's PK Out of the Shadows. For those of you who want to jump right into my opinion about the game, I'll put timestamps throughout this video to make sure you can do exactly that. Before diving into the background of this alter ego, it's only fair that I put out this disclaimer. A lot of the information I found on this alter ego isn't necessarily from a bunch of different official articles. They're from a lot of various wiki pages that I found along with PK's Wikipedia page as well. I'm only putting this out there just to ensure that you, the viewer, are aware of this and to maintain clarity, which I always try to do in my videos. By the way, there are going to be a couple of Italian names and words mentioned in this portion of the video, and I promise that I'm trying my best when enunciating these names and words. The name PK is the shorthanded version of the full name of Donald Duck's superhero alter ego, which happens to be Paperinik. The name Paperinik is a combination of Donald Duck's Italian name, Paperino, and the suffix "ic", which comes from diabolic. To give a small amount of background information on Diabolic, this was a very popular black and white comic book series in Italy starring an anti-hero thief named Diabolic, created by Angela and Luciana Giussani. Diabolic was so popular that the creation of this character led to the creation of a comic book anti-hero subgenre called Fumetti Netti, otherwise known as Black Comics in English. This character eventually influenced Elisa Penna, Guido Martina, and Giovan Battista Carpi to create the Paperinik character that would end up being published in Italy's Disney magazine called Topolino in 1969. Like most superheroes, PK also has a multitude of nicknames, such as the Duck Avenger, which was used in the US, Super Duck, which was used in the UK, and Phantom Duck, which was used in Greece. PK's first comic book story appearance was in a two-part 60-page comic book called Paperinik the Diabolical Avenger, and this storyline is the same storyline that would eventually inspire the story for Disney's PK Out of the Shadows. Sometime down the line, Paperinik would get renewed under a new comic book storyline known as PKNA. The name PKNA comes from a comic book series published between 1996 and 2000 called Paperinik New Adventures. This storyline reinvented Paperinik's character, notably giving him new technology to use as a superhero, such as a weapon we use in the game. This would also be the birthplace of Paperinik's shorthand nickname, PK. According to the PKNA Wikipedia page, PK's comic book series would cover topics such as the relationship between man and robot, the struggle between what is right and what is logical, the essence of true love, the difference between mankind and other alien races, the essence of being a superhero, the relationship between knowledge and power, the importance of history and past historical events. Side note, not that I've read any of these comics, considering they're mostly in Italian, but it's hard to not think about how interesting some of these topics are, especially with knowing the state of technology right now. A modernized take on this character could exist and strive because of where we are today with technology, and it honestly make for a fantastic movie or miniseries. But I understand why Disney would want to keep that character in the past, considering he did end up being a failure for them. However, another cool tidbit on this same Wikipedia page is that the format of these PK comic books were bigger and similar to American comics. These changes would go on to influence the stylizations of other Disney comics such as Mickey Mouse Mystery Magazine. Here are some of the listed changes that we have thanks to this Wikipedia page. The size and the order of the panels break the traditional 6 panels order, alternating splash pages, longer or flattered panels. Strong colorization with a monochromatic panel is used to mark emotional moments or actions. Inspiration also comes from Japanese manga and American comics with the use of kinetic lines, eyes representation, and muscular characters drawn in an oblique way in the panels. Unfortunately, PK's second comic book run would come to an end due to a multitude of reasons, such as a lack of sales, terrible continuity, and more. In 2015, PK's comics would eventually get published by IDW Publishing for the first time, which is pretty cool to think about. Even though PK would end up failing as a character, it's hard to disagree with the sentiment that his existence ended up being sort of a positive thing. From influencing the stylization of future comics to discussing topics that were possibly ahead of his time, PK is honestly kind of an interesting character that flew under the radar. Thankfully, we still ended up getting PK's very own video game, which means it's time to finally jump into the video game itself. Before I do that, don't forget to hit the like button and hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps the channel out. Believe it or not, I don't hate PK Out of the Shadows, and a huge part of that is because this game's flaws aren't insulting or genuinely frustrating to the point where I'm questioning why I even bothered playing this game. In fact, in doing all of the research to learn more about the background of this character, I'm glad I got to fully experience PK Out of the Shadows. The core problem with this game is that it's not revolutionary at all. The game only switches up the gameplay towards the very end of the game, where it teaches you how to use 2 new mechanics, and it's done more so for traversal than actual gameplay purposes. Despite this game having a decent gameplay loop where you're shooting at enemies and traversing through levels that remind me of Crash Bandicoot 1, I couldn't help but want more from this game. I wanted to learn more about the universe of PK, I wanted more enemy variety, I wanted better level design, and I wanted to feel like a better superhero, despite the game trying to sell you on the idea of this experience being PK's learning curve towards becoming one. Spoiler alert, the game's ending sets up a sequel where PK was clearly going to become a better superhero that never came to fruition. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this game is safe, but it's safe in a way where it's frustrating and you'd wish that for once it'd take a risk even if it wasn't a good risk. The biggest problem I have with PK Out of the Shadows is the lack of world building within the game. The game is clearly aimed at a younger audience. It literally has an E for everyone rating, but it doesn't make you feel like your actions as a superhero matter. All of that time spent running around learning how to be a superhero feels more so like a training simulation than an actual coming of age moment for PK. There are barely any cutscenes, there are barely any sub-characters to make the story feel grander, and despite the game taking place in space, the game feels heavily contained. For instance, the main antagonist in this game is a general named Zondag, and the beginning of the game tries to paint him as this massive villain that we, the player, should be afraid of, but he's essentially MIA until the game brings him back to relevance for the final boss fight. The most we ever feel the presence of Zondag is at the beginning of the game. He isn't a lingering thought, and he isn't something that the game tries to reinforce into your mind besides a gigantic statue you see towards the end of the game. Instead of actively trying to build his presence throughout the game wants to sell you on the idea that he's been watching you the entire time, but there's almost no proof of that at all. That idea alone is fairly laughable because if he was watching PK, he'd at least send some henchmen who would have served as actual boss fights instead of one major henchman. Think about it. You're a big bad general with an army and a multitude of henchmen, and here comes this one non-experienced superhero that manages to run through almost every single type of unimportant henchman you have to offer. Do you mean to tell me you're not gonna do something to prevent him from taking down your ship or ending whatever mysterious plans you have? Speaking of which, the game rarely tells us anything about Zondag's mysterious plans. We're just able to make the assumption that he's up to no good and that we're eventually gonna have to take him down towards the end of the game. The lack of world building doesn't even necessarily frustrate me or make me appreciate this game any less. It's just hard to not wish that the developers of this game used the right inspirations to help the creative process of making this game. Personally, I think that they could have taken notes from a game like Crash Bandicoot 1 to find ways to map out a linear story in a game that also happens to have a fairly simple gameplay loop. Unlike the previous games I've reviewed on my channel, such as Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects, or Aquaman Battle for Atlantis, PK Out of the Shadows has an actual semi-rewarding gameplay loop. It is very simple, but it feels light years ahead of both of the previous aforementioned games despite coming out years before both of those games. Get it? Lightyear, a space term to describe a superhero game that takes place in space? No? Fine, I'll stop now. The overall gameplay loop requires you to go through various levels in different locations as PK, and you pretty much just shoot at a bunch of enemies as you traverse through the location. That's really it. It's not mind-blowing and nothing compared to other platforming games that were out at the time, such as Scooby-Doo, Night of 100 Frights, Ratchet & Clank, Sly Cooper, Crash Bandicoot, and the list goes on. However, I have to give credit where it's due. The platforming in this game actually gets the job done. When you're jumping from ledge to ledge or from one moving platform to another, the game doesn't feel janky or feel like it's actively trying to work against you despite your best efforts to complete the game. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't have moments where I sighed of relief because PK managed to grab onto a ledge instead of falling off immediately because I didn't angle or time to jump correctly. Surprisingly, this aspect of the game is where I don't really have complaints because I honestly only had one memorable moment where PK wouldn't grab the ledge. As much as I hate to admit it, the reason that happened is that I wasn't trying to grab the correct ledge that I needed to grab due to arguably the worst part of this game, which I'll get into fairly soon. This isn't the only thing I have to give credit for. This game has a functional camera and target locking. I know, it's breaking news at this point. If you've watched my other retro videos, you'd know that I've gone through so many hours worth of gameplay without a functional camera, target locking, and having to deal with the fact that the game is actively trying to fight against every modern instinct you have in 2021 when it comes to controlling the camera in a video game. Not PK Out of the Shadows though. One of the first things this game teaches you is how to target lock and how to control your camera, and just like the platforming or gameplay loop, it gets the job done. In fact, the target locking system to lock on an enemy might have unintentionally been the best thing they did in this game, because it possibly unintentionally allows you to continuously reset the camera if you're trying to see a different angle of whatever location you're in. Even though the camera works, I'd be lying if I said there weren't times that the camera didn't have moments where it sort of forgot how to be a camera. Specifically in one room, the camera just chooses to not move around or change angles despite me moving around with PK, and the trick I'd use to reset the camera throughout my playthrough wouldn't fix the camera. The only fix that worked was legitimately platforming down to a lower portion of the map to get it to reset its angle to then go back up to where I was. It sounds a lot more inconvenient than it actually is, but it's something I still needed to point out. Don't get me wrong, I entirely understand that I'm nitpicking here. Besides, this is a game that was released in 2002 that I'm talking about here. It's just funny to me that a game that was released in 2002 managed to have a better camera and a functional target locking system, unlike a fighting game that was released in 2005. Yes, I still have beef with Marvel Nemesis. The game is awful, and I hate pretty much everything about it. Now comes the worst part of PK Out of the Shadows gameplay loop. The game's level design is awful. It's not even awful in the sense that the levels are too easy to traverse. Well, yes, the levels are fairly boring and or lack any sense of actual inspiration and variety. That isn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem with it is that the lighting of nearly every single level in this game, besides a random desert level that we were forced to clear, is genuinely way too dark. There is little to no lighting in almost every single level, and the game just uses these orbs to try and guide you, but to find the orbs, you need to enter rooms and use the camera to find little crevices that might lead you towards the next area of each level. For a game that's about space and technology, it's like they forgot to add better lighting throughout nearly every level. Yes, there's lighting, and the levels aren't pitch black, but they're still dark enough to be agitating or to make you think that your monitor or TV have suddenly dropped their brightness levels. It makes no sense to me, considering other levels that are towards the end of the game are brighter than literally 95% of the game. The lack of lighting is frustrating because that doesn't add anything positive to the game whatsoever. It doesn't add a sense of wonder, it doesn't add excitement when you find the next room, and it doesn't make the levels feel bigger than they actually are. All it does is make you wish that the game had an options button in the menu to customize it, which, spoiler alert, it doesn't. There are barely any accessibility options at all, which I can kind of understand since this is a game from 2002. But the bare minimum would have been adding basic adjustable settings such as brightness. Batman Vengeance, another game that was published by Ubisoft and made by Ubisoft Montreal, the same developers of PK Out of the Shadows, was also overly dark due to the base brightness of the game, but that had brightness options to make the game more visible. And on top of that, Batman Vengeance was also released before PK Out of the Shadows, so why didn't this game have brightness options as well? Why were so many levels in this game lacking lighting? It genuinely makes no sense, and it's a major flaw in this game that could have been fixed way before the game was ever released. Obviously, hindsight is 20/21. I'm sorry I had to make that joke. I understand if you hate me for that, but this just feels like something that could have been prevented at pretty much any point in this game's development. Hell, I'll fix it for everyone to show the difference. Here's before, and here's after fixing it during the video editing process. Does this fix take away from the grandiose space feeling that this game is trying to deliver? Because in my eyes, it doesn't make the game any less adventurous or any less futuristic than this game wants you to believe. It's just frustrating because this game had potential, and it's very easy to see it, especially in a non-early 2000 lens, such as the reviews I found from back in the day. Honestly, it feels like those reviews were way too hard on the game, which was not the original expectation I had before playing through this game. After reading the reviews, I was thinking, oh brother, another bad game with awful gameplay and another awful camera that'll make me miserable for 2 to 3 hours of my time. Instead, what I got was an essentially mind-numbing game. There wasn't any point throughout my playthrough where I felt excited to complete a level or felt like I was having a ton of fun. I was simply just playing the game and had some small reactions due to grabbing a ledge, clearing an enemy before almost dying, or finding a green ore to unlock a checkpoint in the next area of the game. PK Out of the Shadows doesn't do anything great. It doesn't do anything terrible. It just kind of gets the job done. The goals of the game seem to be give a decent protagonist with a simple weapon that's easy to use, along with simple platforms to be a part of the long lost 3D platforming era that I love, and have minimal difficulty spikes so almost any player can beat the game. To be honest, the game achieves every single one of those things. PK isn't hateable, but he isn't necessarily lovable. He makes some one-liners here and there, some being funnier than others, but the game doesn't give him enough spotlight time to make you wish they'd stop doing so. PK's weapon, which is a gun, doesn't have any terrible hitboxes or doesn't feel awful to control, so I don't have much to complain about that either. The platforming, as I said, was shockingly good for a game that was released in 2002, but it doesn't reinvent the wheel by any means, nor does it feel advanced enough to make you feel like you've solved a massive section of the game that was meant to be a memorable set piece. The minimal difficulty spikes are simply upgraded enemies, such as an enemy type moving faster than they used to, another enemy type being introduced but has new mechanics such as flying on a platform that looks like the Green Goblin's Goblin Glider, or having to charge up the gun to weaken their shields and then shoot at them till their shields come back up and you rinse repeat the process to defeat the enemies. By all means, the game is exactly what I'd call mediocre. It isn't good, it isn't bad, it isn't terrible, but everything it sets out to achieve gets done. I don't think I can necessarily hate that or give the game shit for doing exactly that, but it's hard to not see the various ways they could have made the game a bigger or grander experience to get the potential sequel they set up greenlit. Diving into the history of PK and his video game was a fun time. I genuinely found it interesting to dive into a small piece of Disney history that most people might not know about, considering it was a character that ended up failing, and it was before most of us genuinely fell in love with Disney. Finding out about PK's origins and seeing what influenced his creation allowed me to do something I've never done for any of my previous videos. Hopefully I get to do something like that again for a future topic, and all of you can give me feedback so I can get better at diving into the history of things and giving all of you new information about topics you may or may not have heard of. As for playing PK Out of the Shadows, I don't necessarily have any overly negative thoughts about the game. It genuinely wasn't an awful experience, and I'm kind of glad I have a physical copy of this game because it's an unpopular video game title for one of my favorite consoles ever. If anything, I do think that the reviews were overly harsh on this game, but it's sort of understandable considering there are much better platforming games that were out during this game's release. My final take on PK Out of the Shadows is that it's a game that clearly had goals it wanted to achieve, and it does that, but in doing so, it sort of forgets to make other aspects of the game better. Despite that though, it's still a somewhat positive experience, but I have zero plans to replay this game anytime soon. I will say though, if Disney were to revitalize this character, I'd instantly be interested whether it's a game, miniseries, movie, or major TV show exclusive for Disney+. That's about it for this video. If you want more videos like this where I go into the history of a video game and then dive into the video game itself, let me know in the comments. I'm down to do this more often for longer videos, and I'd absolutely take in some video game suggestions for future videos. In the official I Don't Beat Games tier list of terrible video games, PK Out of the Shadows is officially the best game. Your reign on the throne didn't last long, Aquaman Battle for Atlantis. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you really enjoyed this video, hit that sub button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, write a comment down below. Don't forget to keep it real with peace, love, and positivity.